I don't know if it's society. I don't know if us as parents have done something wrong, but it seems like too many kids like to give up when things get tough these days. Whether it's showing up to workouts all summer or getting smacked around because you're not the varsity guy yet. And so you're the scout team, JV kid. We started some mental toughness championship mindset training. It was actually brought to me by parents. I had one parent kind of, hey, you guys train physically, weight room, running, conditioning. What about training their minds to be a little stronger? And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. They were kind of talking about the confidence of some of our guys. And I said, yeah. I said, thinking about doing some mental toughness. And the parents like, will you please? I developed a program with my former head coach. I did a lot of legwork because I'm a scholarly guy, and kind of psychology is part of leadership already. So I kind of had a good idea of where to go, and some of the stuff I already knew from the literature in the scholarly world, and adapt it for these young people. So it's a way to teach them how to bounce back from failure, teach them how to be resilient, teach them how to have grit. Then also look at how sports translate to life, and you're going to fail, like fail forward, don't be afraid to fail. You're going to make a mistake. How do you bounce back? That's what's more important. How do you handle those hard things in life? Well, if you've practiced in a controlled environment like sports, it's a little bit easier.
Welcome to the Quarterback Code podcast, where we interview offensive coordinators, QB coaches, quarterbacks, and anyone who can add value as we decode the most difficult position in all of sports. Today's guest is Michael Fields, Varsity Offensive Coordinator at LaGrande High School in Oregon. He's been coaching for over 13 years, starting at the youth level like many of you, and working his way up through every role: volunteer scout, position coach, special teams coach, both offense and defensive coordinator, and even head coach. Off the field, he's an accomplished academic, currently an associate professor of management at Eastern Oregon University, with a Ph.D. in global leadership and an MBA in organizational leadership. We get into how highs and lows of life shape the man he is today, how his passion for education impacts the young people around him, and of course, we dive into his offensive philosophy, running a shotgun wing tee with a mix of air raid concepts, and how he manages his quarterback room, and much more. All this coming up now on the Quarterback Code. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Quarterback Code podcast. Today's guest is Michael Fields, who is currently a varsity offensive coordinator at LaGrande High School in LaGrande, Oregon. One of the most cerebral coaches you'll come across, and in my opinion, we need more coaches like him in the game. Please welcome Coach Michael Fields. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks.
And last thing I'll say, you do have 4 highly rated CoachTube presentations. I'll put those links in the chat as well.
Excellent.
So coaches can learn the football from you after this call as well.
Perfect.
But no, I appreciate you coming on, man. And we've talked over the years on social media, on Facebook, and all Twitter, all these great groups that coaches community out here. And so I wanted to have you on because not only do I love your coaching background, because you did start in the youth at the youth levels and moved your way up like a lot of the coaches on here are trying to do. We have a lot of coaches early in their career. So I wanted to get your perspective on that, but I also wanted to dig in on this leadership piece, which I know you are deeply into as well.
Sure.
So, one of the things we like to do, like I said, we have coaches early in their career. And so we kind of want to give these coaches, and they love to hear it, kind of a full perspective on, where you came from and how you got there. So if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of rewind to your early years, your childhood years.
Okay.
And kind of get to know you a little bit, Coach.
I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, lived on the south side of Indianapolis my whole life till I was 35 years old. And really, I'd say my childhood was pretty much your typical 80s kid, man. We woke up in the morning. My mom made a rule I couldn't leave the house in the summertime or on the weekends till 8 a.m. because, I'm up at 6:30 or 7 just ready to go. And just me and my buddies, we just run the neighborhood. We're riding bikes everywhere. We're playing football in the backyard, baseball, basketball, tennis, whatever. If there was a sport, a ball, if we could throw something at each other, we were doing it. We'd have fist fights with each other just for fun, boxing matches, you name it. We were just kids running the neighborhood, climbing trees, you name it. Like I said, though, I was fortunate. My parents, our little house, it's not a big house, but we had a lot of room in our yard. We had almost an acre. And we were inside the loop of Indianapolis. We're kind of in Indianapolis proper. And it was a dead-end road, so not a lot of traffic. So we played a lot of ball in the street, up and down the road on our bikes, like I said. And all the parents knew where to find us because we were always together. And, there was neighborhood kids. Two of my best friends, their grandparents lived next door. They spent the summers there. They came there after school. So we just, were outside. We were super active and playing. My parents' yard was kind of the place to go to play sports in the neighborhood because we had the most room, and so, and it was two lots next to each other, and they were fenced in, and the house and garage were on one lot and the other lot was open. So we played so much backyard football, baseball, golf, you name it. We were just out there having fun, man. So that was kind of my childhood, and my buddies would come over and we'd run the neighborhood and do whatever we could and push the line and, get in trouble once in a while when you break a window. But, that's just the baseball is a foul ball, my bad. So learn to fix windows too.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're similar age group, and I honestly love the generation we grew up in because we kind of straddled right when we started to become adults. We were straddling the internet. We were straddling like pre-internet and post-internet, pre-marketing like Gatorade and Nike, post-marketing, pre-NBA being amazing, and post-NBA, like just exploding with Michael Jordan and all those guys. So I love the generation we grew up in, and those years of just kind of parking your bikes. And I saw this one meme on social media before where it's like how we used to know where our friends were.
Yep.
And all the bikes would just be in some front of someone's house, right? And just, okay, that's where everyone's at. Just go find them.
Cruise the street and see, your 5 or 6 your buddies' bikes, and you just hop off, run up to the door. Hey, and then you jump in and start hanging out with them, man. That was the life back in the day, wasn't it?
Man, it's simpler times for sure.
For sure.
Very cool, man. And were your parents educators? I'm curious how you found your love for education.
So that's a interesting question. Yes and no. So my mom did end up working in the schools, but she wasn't truly she was an educator. I mean, if you work in a school, you're an educator. Everybody's an educator that has a job in a school, in my opinion. But she didn't have a college degree. She was very fortunate. She graduated in the late 1960s. And then when I was probably, I think it was like the 3rd grade or around there, she became a tutor through this program at our school. And worked for the township. So I went to a private school, but the township still served our private school for tutoring services. It was through Chapter 1 was the name of it. So she was an educator in that sense, and she worked there. The school actually hired her. She worked in the office at the school. She worked as the librarian for a few years and ended up retiring then from the school district, from the school in the archdiocese there at Indianapolis. So then my dad, he'd worked. My dad, ironically, did not finish high school till he was 30 years old.
Wow.
And so he had dropped out and went to work on the farms. He grew up in rural Indiana. And went to work on the farms, throwing watermelons, pitching hay, you name it. And then moved to Indianapolis because his older sister had moved there. Then met my mom and got married. And my mom said, "I'll marry you, but you gotta finish school." So he finished at 30 years old. And so I think it was just knowing that about my parents. And my parents were hard workers. My dad had pretty much laborious job. When I was in high school, he actually got hired full time at my high school in the maintenance department. And then when he retired, he was the head groundskeeper. So he kind of just before that, he had delivered, snack food for a snack company, drove a truck, on a route. And then that was what he'd done most of his career until he worked at the high school. And then again, he retired from the archdiocese as well as head groundskeeper, custodian, and bus driver.
Nice. Right on, man. No, and that's so great, man. I mean, this continue to talk about generations. So sorry to the younger listeners out there, but that's kind of a lost thing in today's world with people doing what they need to do and not making it a bit about their ego or being too good to do something. It's about providing, and it's about advancing yourself. And, I was a corporate recruiter when I started out here in the Bay Area, and we just continue to hear about these stories where, kids go to college and they're lucky enough to go to college and get a degree and whatever that is. But if they don't get a job in that exact industry, they refuse to work and live with their parents. And they don't even get like the hourly job. Like that's not even a thing. So to hear your experience personally, and then, seeing modeled by your dad before that, like you got to keep advancing, and good things will happen, but you got to take those steps to put yourself in a position to be able to take advantage of it, and going to work and figuring out life in the real world is a huge part of your growth. So that's very cool.
I agree 100%. I've got 5 kids of my own, and they're all from 23 to 15 right now. And I work with high school kids as well as college kids in my day job. And I tell them, you don't have to have life figured out. I'm 46 years old and I don't have it figured out, but I've just kept going. And at every chapter kind of in my life, I've just picked a direction and stuck with, and I met with one of our athletes who's having some issues right now, and part of it is he's a junior trying to figure it out. He's being raised by not by his parents but by other family members, and it's like you don't have to know what you're doing after graduation right now, but have a direction you're thinking you might go and just work towards that. And then you'll get to a point you're like, this isn't the direction I want. Then pick a new direction and work towards that, whether it's an hourly job, whether you want to go to the military, go to trade school, go to college. I'm a fan of all that because the world needs everybody, right? We need people that are able to fix computers. We need people that can, fix our plumbing, build houses. We need all those people. So it's like, as long as you're working towards a direction, and you might do it for a year or two and decide that's not you, then you can pick a new direction and go. So that's kind of, it's the life I've lived. It's the life I watch my parents live, and most of my good family, that's kind of what they've done. They're just working, keep being productive, but you can change your direction of where that's going. So
no, it's great advice, man. And I've changed careers 3 times. And like you said, dude, we were in a very similar situation. I have 5 kids between 25 and 15. And when you're early in your 20s and you got to support somebody, I literally had, before I found my career, and that was like 10 years ago, and I'm 46. Yeah. I felt like, I don't know if you remember that Happy Gilmore, at the beginning of Happy Gilmore, where he's talking about all his different jobs and he's doing, he's having fun with it. And that's how I felt growing up when I was in my 30s. Like, I've done so many different jobs, but you'll eventually find your place. And, it's never going to be exactly what you thought it was. I'm doing something now that I never imagined I would do, but you find your way and change careers and change, they say you change careers, the average person 3 times or more in their lifetime. So don't get discouraged by that.
Some of the data I'm reading now on that, it's up to 5 or 6 times. Ooh. That they're changing careers. That's the number I found and I've been using with my students. So not everybody wants to be what, maybe our parents' generation, where you got a job and you stayed there for 40 years and you had the pension and retirement and you got the gold watch. That's not the world today. The world moves too quick for people to do that. So yeah, I agree with you, man. You do what you got to do. And same thing. I've done it with my kids before. I've counted the number of jobs I've had, and it's like almost 30. Going back to when I was a teenager in high school still. So
totally, man. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Just keep grinding. It'll work out. All right, cool. So let's talk about football. When did you start playing football? Back in our days, they didn't really have all these flag leagues and all that stuff. When did you start playing ball?
I started playing in 4th grade, and, I was a little guy. I couldn't even tell you what position I played because it's so young. They just like stick you out there, and hopefully you don't miss a tackle if the ball carrier comes near you. And if you have a chance to touch the ball, hopefully you don't fumble it. That's about all they're hoping for with 4th graders, So yeah, I started playing in 4th grade. Then I played up until high school. And then I got injured my sophomore year of high school. So that kind of derailed the playing career at least. So
got it. And starting that 4th grade, that was tackle, huh?
Okay. Full tackle, 11-man football. Back in the days when drills, like, some of the stuff that I say is banned. I don't know if it is in every state, but I know I don't let my guys do it. No Oklahoma, no bull in the ring, but that's what we were doing back then every day. And you just hope you didn't get your number called when you had a big 6th grader that outweighed you by 50 pounds across from you.
For sure. And I think we all had tasted it.
Oh yeah.
I didn't start playing until 8th grade, but the first time I did pick a hole was against a kid that had been playing, even in 8th grade, he'd been playing for, 6 years. And,
yeah.
And back then it was like coaches were laughing when people got lit up. And
oh yeah,
it's an introduction. So but that was kind of rite of passage type stuff. But like you said, we're trying, especially at the youth level, to manage out these.
Oh yeah,
true Oklahoma from back in the day. Anything where it's like 10 yards apart and there's very little in between you and the tackler, like that's just unnecessary. And you see it every day on social media, and it's so frustrating because that's what's going to kill youth football. And youth football is going to die here within the next 10 years, and it's because of stuff like that, unfortunately.
I'm 100% with you there. I remember I ran the youth league here in LaGrande for a few years, and a couple coaches, we need to make them tough and do this and that, and I just said no. And at the end of conversation, no, we're not doing that. We did everything by USA tackling. We made our coaches get certified in the few years I was in the league. First time they'd ever really required that. we essentially banned all those drills. We said, kind of, what some guys would call truck and trailer. We got 2 blockers, 2 defensive linemen, maybe a linebacker and runner, and you're only maybe 5 to 7 yards, but you got some blockers in there. We can do that. That's simulating a game-like situation. That's a live situation. You got a chance to get blocked or you can make a cut on the guy. But, that was about as extreme as we could get, and half-line type stuff, obviously, too, with the youth level. But, we got to make the game safer. You know it. I know it. Guys that have been in this gig for 15 plus years now, we all know if the game isn't safer and mom and dad can trust that, little Johnny is going to not come home, with a dislocated shoulder every day, then they're more likely to let them play. And that's a real movement. I remember the one game I got to play fullback in middle school, and saying, that's exactly what happened. It was like 3rd down and 1, and they're like, fullback dive or whatever we called it. And I take the handoff, and I just bury my head and I just drive like 8 yards. And then the coach is like, same play the other way. So I do it again. I get like 8 yards of carry for like 3 plays in a row. And then, but I'm carrying like every linebacker and defensive back trying to, this is back before you couldn't push, right? You couldn't push back in the day. And so I'm just like, head down. Yeah, it was fun. Unfortunately, the kid they had playing center at the time couldn't snap the ball consistently. So I got switched back there after that game. So, but it was fun. That was my one glory of carrying the ball in one game. So high school, I got a few catches, though. Made up for it in high school. That was a good time.
Hey, and all you youth coaches, man, if you're up enough, this is when you put a lineman.
Absolutely.
We used to switch lineman and running back, and the running back would go to the line.
Yep.
And the lineman would go back to the tailback, and they'd get the carries in the end of the 4th quarter or whatever it was, just for fun. So let them eat a little bit too, because once they get to high school, that's not going to happen unless it's a very, very different situation. So it's a nice little team building thing. Everyone kind of roots on the lineman when they get a chance to carry the ball, and it's a fun experience. And you're still talking about it today, right? So let them eat.
Yeah. When I coach youth football, how many years at it? About 7 years combined. We would always do that. You'd get that kid, you'd pick one kid a game, and I didn't even care if we were down. We didn't keep score in most of the youth leagues I coached in. And so I didn't care. I'm like, hey, right before the half, let's get this kid in the backfield and let him touch the rock one time, and just because you never know, that kid could end up being a running back by the time he's in high school. And that kid, this running back, might be the 6'5", 280-pound left tackle. You just don't know. So you might as well work these skills with all the kids at the youth level. That's my mantra. And if I ever get asked, I always tell youth coaches, everybody needs to know how to do everything. There's a few kids, probably going to be a lineman his whole life, but go ahead and let him eat, let him have that chance once or twice, because that's probably his only time he's going to get to. But some of the other kids, you never know.
Yeah, you're right. I thought I knew it all, but now that I've been through the cycle of taking a kid from 8 years old and now they're graduated high school now, and I've definitely been wrong. And a lot of times, like, oh, this kid's this or this kid's that.
Yeah.
You just don't know. I mean, the DNA, you can kind of look at the parents, but even that tricks you sometimes. So don't put these kids in a box. That's a good call. Okay, so what kind of student were you in high school or growing up? Just curious.
I was good when I was playing sports. I was a really good student when I had something to kind of focus me up. But, my junior and senior year, I maybe slipped a little bit. I graduated in the mid to late 90s. And when you still thought you could graduate high school and go get an amazing job. So I was like, I'm not going to college. And so the academic side maybe wasn't a priority. Statistically speaking, with how I finished high school, I shouldn't have a Ph.D. But I graduated, took a gap year. But I wasn't a misbehaving kid. I made some dumb choices, as most teenage boys will at some point in time. But, I corrected all those things. And like you, I got married relatively young, and our daughter was on the way, honeymoon baby and all this and that. So I matured pretty young in my 20s. But, I'd say 17 to 19, I wasn't the best student, and took a year off and just kind of lived life a little bit. And then I was like, well, probably should go to college and be a responsible human being now. So it took me a little bit to kind of figure that out. But once I did, I locked in college. My first year or two, I was a typical college student, skipping class and thinking I didn't need to go. And then about my last, I took almost 6 years to graduate my undergrad. I was a much better student the last 2.5, 3 years, and, kind of realizing, hey, I'm spending money on this. I should probably graduate. So it's ironic. My GPA in my PhD program was higher than my master's, which was higher than my undergrad, which was higher than my high school. But the bar wasn't real high out of high school. Let's put it that way.
No, but I think that tracks, Coach, because, I was the same in high school. I could pass by and fine.
Yep.
I did okay with my SATs and I did okay with my GPA. But when you find something that actually interests you, right?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, this is actually interesting. And you naturally just study for it because it's actually things that you want to learn about. So I think that tracks. Where did you go to your undergrad? Sorry, I didn't even ask.
So my undergrad, I went to what is now Indiana University, Indianapolis.
Got it. I'm trying my hardest not to get into the Larry Bird and that whole Indiana lore of basketball. I love that era, but
he's the king, man. He's
yeah,
the best ever.
I have never worn, and I have like this thing about a grown man wearing other people's jersey. And I'm from the West Coast. I've never lived on the East Coast. I've only been a few times just for sports. This is the only jersey I've ever worn. And honestly, like, he's a legend. Did you see? By the way, I told myself I wouldn't go down this rabbit hole. Did you see his grandson or something that's playing high school? Literally, dude, 6'6", his body, the way he moves, it's exactly like him, dude. It's
he's a miniature Larry.
Yeah, look on YouTube. It's
okay.
Crazy. Anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole because we would derail this whole conversation. I think we both like hoops from back in the day.
Oh yeah.
You start going through your undergrad and you start really understanding, okay, education is for me. Yep. What took you to do your to get a doctorate and MBA? I mean,
I was trying to be an entrepreneur, and I say trying because when you don't have money because you're raising kids and you're young, you can't really do entrepreneurial things, right? And I this is the honest reason why I started my MBA program. I had paid a consulting firm to do some financial projections for me, and it was a lot of money. And when you don't have any money's a lot, but this was like $700 and something I had to pay this firm. And when I got it back, I realized I could have done it, but I was like, I didn't understand the accounting and finance part. And so naturally I just thought, well, let's get a master's in business, right? So let's get an MBA. So I did that. And then I was working in corporate America. I had about 6 years in corporate America before I turned to academia kind of full time. And I knew, like, my goal was to be the entrepreneur, be a successful business person, and then give back in my sunset career and teach. Right. And so I was working in corporate America, and I always tell people I accidentally got a PhD, and this story is probably even crazier. I was at work and I received this newsletter that they have in Indiana called Inside Indiana Business, and there was an ad for a PhD in global leadership, and that just fascinated me because my MBA, I had the organizational leadership concentration. And so I clicked on it, filled out the informational form, and 6 months later I started a PhD program. Long story short, I flipped it, and I decided I would start the academic career and hopefully make money as an academic. I haven't figured that piece out yet, but I'm trying to. Maybe when the kids get out of the house, I'll actually save on groceries enough to make money, and then I can start some of my entrepreneurial things and kind of do that. So I'm kind of flipping my trajectory here and doing the academic higher education piece, and then maybe pursue the entrepreneurial things after.
Yeah, man. And you're, again, dude, I think we got a lot in common. So the fact that you're talking about the entrepreneurial piece later in life, I've been doing a lot of research on that because, I have Player Book now and I'm in my 40s. And actually there's a shocking amount of biggest brands in the history of our planet were started by people post 40, post 50. Yep. I mean, you can go down the list. These are big stinking names, man, that people, and I'm assuming that, life experience and perspective have given them a chance at this. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. You're right. You're right on the right path, dude. And, it's something that is more common than most people think. And I've been reading a lot about that.
Absolutely. Everything from our brand names where we eat our fast food, right? McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, exactly. All those, 40, I think 65 for Colonel Sanders before he ever actually started his chicken recipe. It's crazy.
Yeah. Very cool, man. When did you start thinking, okay, now you got your career going, you're an academic, I'm assuming at this point, like when did football come back to your mind and wanting to get in front of kids and start coaching?
Yeah. Well, football never left my mind, thankfully. So, in high school, everybody thought I'd be the PE teacher and coach right away. And I kind of thought so too. And I never forget being young and naive and going, well, teachers don't make money, I don't want to do that, right? So I literally made a choice not to do that. And then we circled back, 15 years, and here I am. But right out of high school, I was still early on in my academic career, my undergrad, I was working at my old high school. I worked as a high school custodian, sweeping floors at night, cleaning bathrooms, went full-time in the summers. Then I went full-time my last about 2 years I was there. And it's kind of funny. A lot of the guys I played for in high school were still coaching. And so they'd be like, hey, Fields, this is the late 90s, right? So huddle's not a thing, right? You don't get to swap film. Varsity would go trade VHS tapes on Saturday morning, right? The coaches would set up a meeting and they go hand each other VHS tapes, right? And my old coaches that I'm referring to here were kind of the freshmen and JV coaches. And, I'd have a big game coming up. Hey, Fields, man, you think you could run up to crosstown and watch this team? We play them next week. Yeah, sure, man, whatever. And they'd usually give me like $10 out of their own pocket so I could, get a Snickers bar or something while I'm there and, pay my gate fee, right? $5 or $3 probably back then. And, $2 left for my gas money, right? And so I did that for about 2 years, a couple times a year. They didn't need every team scouted. It's freshman JV, but occasionally it'd be like, oh, it's our rival. We want to kind of know them, or this school, they're undefeated right now. We want to make sure we're ready for them, type of deal. And my high school is a football high school. So, we were private school. We didn't recruit when I was there. I can't speak for what they do today, but my old coach, when he finally stepped down in 2016, had 7 state championships. So, when I say football school, we were a football school. So scouting at the JV and freshman level is not that out of the ordinary, right? So I did that for a couple years for those guys. And then where I ended up starting my career there at the Catholic elementary school for 7th and 8th grade, I kind of knew I wanted to, but I didn't want to go down to the young guys because I was still pretty young, so I wanted that 7th and 8th grade level. And there was a guy who had started coaching there right while I was in high school. I kind of told him I wanted to coach at that level. And the board that ran the sports at the school, they were like, well, we'd have to put you on a ballot and vote him out. And I'm like, no, I'm not trying to interrupt some guy's career when he's been doing it for 10 years, And so about 2 or 3 years passed by and they call me and they say, hey, we want you to be an assistant for him. And I'm like, awesome. So that was 2009. There was kind of he had some assistant coaches that they didn't want to come back. Let's put it that way. And so they were appointing the assistant coaches for the head coach. And I ended up having a great relationship with him. And I knew him already from our church and community. So I knew him. He had a ton of experience, he'd been doing it for 10, 15 years at that point. And so just started coaching. I think I was 28, 29 years old, and was coaching middle school. First year, I was just a basic assistant coach, learning how to be a coach a little bit. He was a pretty good mentor because he knew the game really well. It was that connection with the kids. He was a little bit older that maybe was starting to drift a little bit. So that's kind of where I knew I could find my niche, and I coached O-line, D-line, and then the next year, my second year, I was O-line defensive coordinator. The third year, same thing, O-line defensive coordinator. Then my last year, he had to step down the head coach had to step down for job purpose. And so I was the head coach, D coordinator, special teams. And then we moved and I went down to youth after that for a few years. So yeah, that was kind of my start. I always knew it was in my blood. I always knew I would coach at some point, and it was just the opportunity came and I took advantage of it. And, I'd tell anybody that wants to get into coaching, go to your local youth league. Every youth league needs volunteer coaches. Just go and say, I want to coach, fill out the form, get you a little background check. And they're probably going to, have you start as an assistant, which I always recommend. Be an assistant for a few years, because jumping in right away as a head coach when you haven't coached before, even if you played at a high level, I know some guys do it. They jump in at head coach right away, but I actually liked being an assistant for 3 years before I ever had a head coaching role, because I learned how to deal with parents, and I was doing it as an assistant, but you're not the main dude, right? So you can learn from the other coaches. You can learn, I learned every position. I'm comfortable up to the high school level to coach any position, offense, defense, even kicking and special teams, because I've done it middle school and high school at this point in my career. So that's kind of it, and then we moved so I could have a full-time job, and we moved to New Mexico. My oldest son at that point, had played flag a little bit and was ready for the tackle league. And I signed him up and told the league I'd coached before. And the young guy that was trying to be the head coach had a weird working schedule to where our second week of practice, he wasn't there. And so I'm just kind of, okay, doing everything I know. And Tuesday, he's not there. Wednesday, I finally call him. He's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, I work a swing shift every other week. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I wasn't the head coach, but I kind of was. Then the next year I was. And then we moved here to LaGrande, and kind of the same thing. My son was looking to play football. He was a fourth grader by then because he played second and third grade because he was a little bit older for his grade. It was age-based, not grade-based in the youth league there. Yeah. And got here, it was grade-based. And same thing, we move in August because I'm an academic, so my life rolls on the school year. Football had just started. He was, wanting to play. I could find the flag league because here they were running kind of parallel leagues. There was a tackle, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And then we had a youth league up to 5th and 6th grade at flag. And my younger son started flag at the same time. So I was coaching both of them actually for about 2 or 3 years. And I just told the guy running the league here, I'd coached for, at that point, 6 years, middle school and youth. They had already assigned coaches. So the head coach of the team my son was on, about the third day, I'm just standing there watching. He comes over and goes, hey, I hear you know how to coach football. I said, yeah, I've done it for a few years. And he goes, all right, I need some help because he had a couple of assistants who were parents and didn't really know how to coach football. And so I jumped in, and by the end of practice, the way we did tackle back then here, we had what we called little team and big team. So you put your little team to play the first and third quarter, big team would play the second and fourth. So you're not getting 6th graders against 4th graders. Your 5th graders, you'd split them based on size and ability to keep it as to keep the parity of the league as close as we could. He goes, you're in charge of the little team, like one day of practice. And I'm like, okay. And then the next year, a new guy took over as what we called the commissioner of that league. And he didn't have a kid. He was just a guy that was a youth football enthusiast, and he ran it then for the next 4 years. And, first meeting, I get to know him, and practices we would run 2 weeks of camp before we split the teams up. So we'd run camp, train all the kids on proper tackling, proper, blocking skills, start to figure out who can throw it a little bit, who can run, and divide the teams as even as we could after that. And he realized I knew football really well. So he kind of dubbed me his right-hand man to be the operations guy. So I took care of setting up that camp, what stations were doing it, what coaches were running what station. And then I did that for the next 4 years before I moved up to the middle school here. Still coached in the youth league. My 1 year at the middle school here, even my first year on the high school staff, I still coached in the youth league because I was a late hire at the high school, and so I didn't feel like it was fair to my team and the league if I left them. So coached multiple teams for about 6 years, flag and youth tackle, and then middle school and youth tackle, high school and youth tackle. It was a good time.
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
Man, I think we could do another show, and I think we should, on just your experience with youth.
Sure.
Because this is probably the youth and middle school is probably the majority of this this audience.
Sure.
So how did you transition to high school? Was it like you wanted to get up to that level, or how did that work?
Yeah, back to my roots in Indianapolis. My goal was to get to the high school level. I think there's something magical about coaching on a Friday night and being involved in those Friday nights under the lights, man. The Friday night lights, it's a real thing, And so in Indianapolis, my head coach I played for in high school was still the head coach at the high school when I was doing the middle school thing there in Indianapolis. And I had a meeting with him, to make sure we were feeding him, players in the right system and all this stuff, right? And I told him, Coach Seifried, I said, Coach, if you ever need help up here, I'd love to come and help you. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and, he was my coach, so I had to still have a ton of respect for him. He goes, Michael, I need you right where you are at your middle school. And I said, got it, Coach. And so he knew I was going to feed him athletes in his system,
Right.
And again, we did this whole program thing from the high school down to our 3rd and 4th grade level of teaching their offense, their defense, their drills. Obviously, we modified stuff. 8 years after we started doing that, they won their last state championship, and that's when he retired. So there's a definite, I've got multiple cases where programs do that. Those are your most successful high schools. So we modeled that here, and it's worked. We were until 2 years ago, and then even this past season, we've made the playoffs every year but one since 2018. So with a state championship in 19 and went to semi-state in 2022. And most of those athletes were guys that were in the youth program when I was there. And I went right to the high school and I said, what are you guys doing? And we took their drills, their terminology, and brought it down to the youth and middle school level, where they get the same thing from the time now they're in 5th grade when they start tackle here, 5th grade through high school. So when you get them, those base 4 run plays, they know what it means. They don't run it great, but they know what it means. And then we can tweak them when they get to high school. So we could definitely do a whole show on that program building, because I'm a big proponent of that. So it's why I'm such a fan of our youth program here. And I work closely with our city rec department that runs it. So
it's awesome, man. Yeah, I think we should. I think that transition and getting buy-in from both sides is huge.
It is.
Because that's the whole point of youth football at all.
For sure.
Okay, cool. So now you're at the high school level, and we've talked. I mean, I know that you are a big proponent, I think, the shotgun wing tee, some Kenny Simpson influence in there, and Pat Murphy. Pat Murphy.
Simpson, we borrow his stuff too. Don't get me wrong. If it works, we borrow it.
But you get to start. You're working with quarterbacks currently. How long has that been going on? The quarterback.
Yeah. So the head coach that hired me at the high school, he had been the 8th grade coach, and that's why I went up to the middle school for a year to kind of fill in. There was 2 new coaches there, and I was just a volunteer. And then he was the one that asked me to come to the high school and apply, and thankfully he hired me, so I owe a ton to him. It was about the 3rd year working with him, because 2019 I was a late hire. We were undefeated state champs. We had some amazing athletes. Sometimes genetics are amazing. I mean, 6 of those guys played college ball for at least 1 year. Nice. And we're 4A, which Oregon goes to 6A, so we're not big. So anyway, it was about the 3rd year, because the 2nd year was COVID, and we played a weird spring league and only had like 4 games. And it was kind of, thankfully we still got to play football, right? But then it was that fall of 21, and I was really kind of, I'd learned from him. He was the offensive coordinator when he was the head coach, and I'd learned the offense from him. And he and I, we lift in the morning every day together when we open it for the kids. Wish we'd get more kids in there, but that's a whole other episode, right? But we would talk about his offense all the time, and he'd be like, hey, Kenny Simpson, watch this video. What do you think about this, formation or play? And, hey, watch this video. And so we just started, bouncing stuff off of each other. And we're going into that fall, and I said, his name's Rich. I'm like, hey, Rich, where do you want me position-wise? And he goes, Michael, honestly, I don't have anybody to help my quarterbacks. And the irony was his son was one of our quarterbacks at the time, who ended up actually being our tight end after that, because he was just a big dude, and we had 2 kids in that grade. And I said, okay. And again, I'm an academic, so I just started researching, how do I work with quarterbacks, and still I coach quarterbacks on the offensive side. I work with quarterbacks and running backs. I've got 2 guys this past fall that were running backs in our system. So I was able to kind of let them, they were both 1st-year coaches, so I kind of had to mentor them up. And then I work with our quarterbacks. I do have a quarterback coach who will come and work with our guys. Nice. He's one of these clinicians that does all these national, he works for NFA and all these other Elite 11s and all that. He does clinics for them. And he's out of Boise, which is 2.5 hours, almost 2:45 away from us. He'll come over a couple times a year. And so I pick up what he does. And I know quarterbacks really well for our system, but I understand the basic quarterback throwing mechanics for any system and footwork. So that's how it started. It was 2021. It was like, hey, I need somebody to work with quarterbacks. So during daily doubles, when we went to Indies, I took the quarterbacks. We worked on footwork, worked on basic mechanics. And then for us, our quarterback runs the ball a lot. So we do a lot of we steal read option stuff in our offense. So it's a lot of the read option and how we read it. And then we do what we call a wing T drill for our under center stuff, because we do go under center still. And so I would be the guy working with the quarterbacks, watching their feet, making sure the footwork's right, watching their drops, making sure they're staying on midline, giving them their reads, hey, this is first read, second read, third read. And then, because our passing game is based off of like the air raid, West Coast spread stuff. So it's kind of that on top of the wing T running game. So, I just started working with quarterbacks and then dove in and learned more, because it's the one position I never played middle school or high school in a game was the quarterback. I played some line, played some tight end, a little bit of running back, played linebacker, D-line, DB a little bit in middle school. And then it was like, okay, you're coaching quarterbacks now. So
right. Well,
I had to learn a lot.
You can find coaches at the youth level, middle school level. You can tell the ones that like to do the research, and you can teach yourself just about darn near anything, right? If you will immerse yourself in it, and you hear it time and time again. And yeah, I mean, it's funny you bring up the air raid and West Coast passing with wing T. I'm actually interviewing Eric Vaughn, who literally created the website wingraid.com. And, we want to dive into that because especially at the youth level, a lot of those coaches are scared to go full air raid for good reason. It's kind of scary saying I'm going to put all my trust in this 11 or 12-year-old to throw the ball.
Sure.
But they want to layer in something like wing T. So that's interesting. But the great thing about it is your coaching decision making, and whether it's a running play, like you're saying, the read option, or and we all know wing T is based on deception, right?
Yep.
Or passing, my question is, how are you teaching decision making? And I guess this is for progressions too. Yeah. How are you teaching that? Are you like whiteboard guy? Are you, only on the field? I'm only going to do this on the field. How are you teaching that?
All of the above, including your tool, player book, a lot of film. We do watch a lot of film right now. It's not the best situation because my son happens to be our quarterback. So it's easy for me and him to sit and talk football, but he's a 3-sport athlete. So he's only, he's football, basketball, track. So for the two of us, it's easy, but I've got, really good relationships with all of our guys. Like I mentioned, our guy that will come to town and help our quarterbacks, and he puts on clinics for our guys. So he'll come to town. And I've got our middle school guys, high school guys, and then he's got guys from the area that he works with that will come and work with him here, right? So when we do that, we'll take our guys to a different session and we'll go through a lot of the R4 stuff with them.
Yeah.
So we'll go through a lot of that with them on the whiteboard, but also with the projector. And then with our guys in season, I do that with film as well. So we're not just talking about that. We don't use a passing tree. So we don't use a route tree like most guys. We name all of our routes because it's just easier. And then our pass play is the first route they're supposed to read. So, we have, our kind of flood concept is called turn. So we just call, formation, all the things, then turn. And then we put in our pass protection after that. All of our guys know the turn route, and that's read number 1. And it's a low to high concept. We're mostly low to high with our reads. It's just higher percentage. And then some of the science tells us that it's easier to go from the lower reads to the higher reads than it is to go from the higher, the deep routes down. So we start with the short routes and read up, and it's a 1, 2, 3, all to the same direction almost every time. Cause we don't run trips. We have a tight end, wing, and then a wide out on the same side. So the 11 tray is what we call that look, right? So we have 3 receivers on the same side almost every play. We have a doubles look too, where we move the wide out over to the slot. But even then, that's mostly our mesh concepts, right, where they're crossing. So we kind of have easy built-in reads to where it's read 1, read 2, read 3. And then if you're not throwing the ball at that point, you're probably tucking it and running because you're probably at 3 seconds at that point. And we say 3 seconds, the ball's got to be out. From the time you catch the snap, 3 seconds, the ball has to be out. So we do use kind of that air raid idea of getting the ball out quick. Even on our deep routes, it's like when he's at 12, you're throwing it and he'll run under it at 20. Like you're not waiting till he gets to 20 to throw it. We're not looking for 40-yard bombs. Sure, on the the tagged X route when we're running go, yeah, you're not even doing anything. You're catching it and you're just putting it out and letting your X run under it. But other than that, we're kind of a quick read. Kind of that read rhythm release idea, and so we use that R4 in the preseason. Then when we get into season, it's like, this is read number 1. If he's not there, there's number 2. If he's not there, there's number 3. If it's not there, get the heck out of there. Get out of the pocket. Just get to the line of scrimmage or throw it away, right? Yeah. In Oregon, we couldn't throw the ball away until just a couple years ago. It had to look like a pass, so I had to teach quarterbacks to literally throw at the feet of the receivers. Now we can actually throw it away. So that was a weird thing.
No, and a couple things to touch on, man. I mean, you've said it a couple times, and when we started talking quarterback technique, you alluded to it, but an underrated thing that quarterback coaches, and I'm talking about like offensive coordinators that are working with the receivers and quarterbacks in a tackle situation, the timing of the drop and the actual play has to make sense, or it's all going to be thrown out. Like that is the first thing you need to make sure. This route concept goes with this drop So
Yep.
he can hit that back step at the right time to throw his first read whenever that's going to happen. And if it's a quick game or drop back game,
Yep.
that is a huge coaching point. And number two, I love the fact, and we do this with all of our, especially the middle school and youth, 3 receivers. If I got 3 receivers to one side, I can make my route combinations work, and they are all 3 within this quarterback's view
Yeah.
as he drops back, right? Like
Yep.
he's not scanning the whole field. I mean, yes, if you have an elite quarterback, add that in later in the season, but it's all within the view. And we always low to high. There's
Yep.
high level guys like Hal Mummy that go, and the NFL goes high to low. But man, high percentage, get the ball out. You're speaking our language here on this channel, man.
And then we always know, right, that our single receiver side can be a pre-snap hot route. Like
Period.
That's always like he's got his route and they've got, I give my quarterback and receiver the liberty. They come up with their hand sign or word that they're going to yell to check to the quick slant, or if they're going to check it out of whatever the called route is. And sometimes we even tell the quarterback, you can tag him with what you're seeing in the game, or we might see it on film and say, hey, think about tagging this on, if we have this route combination with our 3 receiver side, tag the X to this route. And that pre-snap of, I've got pressure, you see the blitz is going to come, he can check and he knows he's just going to catch and fire right to the X right away. Everybody else does what they're supposed to do, and so we kind of build in, some guys call it the if-then stuff, right? I don't really use that language with my players. I just say, hey, if you see pressure, hit the hot route, and the X or the tight end is typically our hot route, because our tight end's going to, and our deep route combination, what we have, our tight end is the 5-yard hitch, and so it's like, if pressure's coming, bam, just hit him right away, and we're in the shotgun 80% of the time or more, probably 90 most of the time. So our footwork's important, right? We don't do 5 steps hardly ever, 3-step on our deep routes, a lot of punch 1 and pop steps, depending on which way he's got to get his hips. And then our quarterbacks they catch it, pop, pop, boom, throw balls out, because 1 second is receiving the snap when you're in the gun. Set your feet. You're at second number 2. Now you got to be throwing. So you're reading while you're stepping back, and you already know you're on read 2, read 3. And then if it's not there, he's in great position. And, we teach our line how to block it right. And then even our back, is in pass protection, and we've got a release call for him. And we had one game last year where they were not picking the running back up out of the backfield. So we had a release call where he would just go up, kind of slow down like he was going to block, and then release into 2 different routes that we had him tagged with. And we scored twice on that. So
Love it.
Quick reads though, right? He caught the ball, quarterback caught the ball, not there, turns, right there's the back, dumps it off. And thankfully we got a kid who's probably going to get looks at the next level at running back. So he's off to the races, man. He's out, he's pulling away from everybody.
He's in space. That's the whole game, right?
Get him the ball in space and let an athlete do something with it.
Period. And make you look like a genius.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you're teaching progressions and decision making for your team, all the different ways. How are you quantifying as a coach if they're even understanding what you're talking about? Because sometimes these kids can either get lucky or it's something they can, but to know that they can consistently do this and make good decisions. How are you quantifying that? Is it more of the same?
Obviously film doesn't lie, film doesn't lie. And you can see your quarterback, how he's moving, and you can gauge how he's reading. But for me, it's communicating with my quarterbacks. I'm the varsity OC, but we're fortunate, at least when our JV is at home, we get done in time to come watch the second half usually of their games. But I'm talking to those guys too, and I'll bring up their film with them, and I'll talk to them about it. And we don't throw the ball a ton at the JV level. I mean, we throw it a decent amount. We're probably a 70 run, 30 throw. I'm working to get closer to 60-40 because varsity level, we need to do that, right? And it's a progression, right? Early in the season, we're running more. As the season goes, we're going to throw more. And we have a ton of RPOs. We tag RPOs on almost every run that we have in the playbook, almost. And our quarterback has the green light, at the varsity level to pull it and make the throw or the run on any play. Like if he sees it Even if he's wrong, he's got to be able to come over to me and tell me pre-snap what he saw. And I'm going to say, that's okay. You learn from it, you know? So I guess the way we quantify it, you know, touchdowns, yards, and interceptions are easy numbers to look at. But a lot of times you look at interceptions and you got a tip ball or you had pressure, you know, and he's throwing off his back foot. So that's unfair to a quarterback because you're relying on somebody else. So really, I'm just watching the quarterback, you know, watching him. Did he use the right drop? Did he hit the right receiver? Because, you know, pre-snap, a lot of times, you know, okay, they're cover two, or, hey, he's in bail technique. So, you know, that flat's going to be open. So a lot of times pre-snap, you know what he should do. And then if he doesn't do that, you know, when he comes out and the next series, say, hey, on that throw, man, why'd you hit this guy instead of that guy? And if he tells me he saw something that looked better on the field than what I see from the sideline, I'm okay with that during the game. Then during that week in our film session, we're going to have that conversation again and be like, okay, well, you saw this, but now on film, if you notice, this backer was already, you know, bailing, and that's why he picked you off or tipped the play or whatever, right? So we do a lot of that. And so I'd say that's really our quantifying is just how does it look on Monday when we open up the film.
Right. And then if they can spit back the nuance of what they're doing, then you should be golden. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So talk to me about when you're in practice, and especially in camp, right? Like we probably as quarterback coaches have some things pre-snap we kind of want them to see. And let's talk about passing plays, right? Do you have, you know, a lot of coaches say middle of the field open or close, how many safeties, you know, linebacker depth, or do you have like a core keys that you want your quarterbacks looking at before every play?
We read safeties first, and we're not necessarily looking at open or closed, although we've started to incorporate that language. We're looking at, are we starting with 2 deep, 1 or 3? You know, so we just want to get that base read because that's going to tell us a couple of our pass plays have choice routes. So that's going to tell us first which route the guys are running. And our quarterback's going to yell it out, you know, double, single, whatever, you know, they come up with. They, you know, teenage kids will come up with their own calls out in the huddle that I don't even know. And I'll hear them sometimes. I'm like, what were you telling them out there? And they're like, oh, I was telling them it was too high. And I'm like, you said Scooby-Doo. He's like, yeah, that's my word for it. You know, whatever. I'm making that one up, but that's what kids do, right? And they love it. And I give them that freedom. I'm like, as long as all 11 guys know what that means, do whatever you want. So anyway, first read is safeties, right? First read is safeties. And then the next read I have them look at is box count, actually. Because with your box count, you're going to know your pressure and where your pressure is going to come from. So you're going to know where the window is to throw the ball, right? So if you got 4 guys, you only got 3 blockers on that side, you're losing a window to that side. So that's our first thing we look at. And then it's reading corners. Is he in a press technique? Is he in a bail technique? Is he soft? You know, is he press or is he soft? If he's soft, we're going to hit the route, you know, catch and go. If he's pressed, we got to give it a little time to develop because he's going to get pressed off the line. So we don't necessarily read open close. That's not a pre-snap, I should say. That's I got the ball now, did a backer drop, and they're actually 2 deep now. Then that tells him he should be hitting the corner route, not the inside dig route or whatever it is, because you know, that second safety, that's what you're trying to throw to that spot. Now he's there, so you can't go there. That outside route is going to be open because you know the corners and the flats at that point. So that's kind of how we do it. Because at the varsity level, you know, they'll roll guys, they'll shift, you know, a lot more than at the youth and middle level. You know, they disguise things pretty good. So the pre-snap is just how many safeties, so we know the routes that we're calling, and then box count, so you know pressure, and then corners, so you know what your flats look like.
Awesome. No, that's great, man. That's great insight, especially with the evolution from youth to high school. All right, man. We're way over right now. Sure. I want to ask you just anything that you want to get out there. I mean, we talked a little while ago about this awesome leadership program you do with younger kids. I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about to the audience.
Yeah, you know, something that just you and I have had this conversation off air, but I don't know if it's society. I don't know if us as parents have done something wrong, but it seems like, you know, too many kids like to give up when things get tough these days, you know, whether it's showing up to workouts all summer or getting smacked around because you're not the varsity guy yet, and so you're the scout team, JV kid. But kids like to kind of give up, So we started some mental toughness championship mindset training. It was actually brought to me by parents. I had a couple of parents. I had one parent kind of, hey, you guys train physically, weight room, running, conditioning. What about training their minds to be a little stronger? And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. And I had thought about it. My former head coach and I, we'd had this conversation for a year, right? So a parent comes to me and says it, and I'm like, it's time to listen. Just ironically, that parent talks to me a couple days later. I'm at a basketball game, another parent, and they were kind of talking about the confidence of some of our guys. And I said, yeah. I said, thinking about doing some mental toughness. And the parents like, will you please? And so then I talked to a couple more parents, and they were all like, yes. And so I developed a program with my former head coach. I did a lot of legwork because I'm a scholarly guy, and kind of psychology is part of leadership already. So I kind of had a good idea of where to go. And now I've bought, every book on mental toughness that's out there. And some of them are really like my world I live in as a global leadership professor and management guy is some of the stuff I already knew from the literature in the scholarly world and adapt it for these young people. So we're about a year in. We're about to kick it off again for this year at the high school, and we open it to all male athletes. We do feel it's important because, these young men are a little vulnerable when they're talking about this stuff. And so we do only have the male athletes. And then I've got a person I'm trying to get for the female athletes to get going this year, because my own daughter's like, Dad, I want to do that. And I'm like, okay, I don't want you in there with all the boys because, they're vulnerable, and they won't be if the girls are in the room. We know that. I mean, we just know that as teachers and coaches, that they won't be as vulnerable, right? Because you got to kind of talk about yourself a little bit and admit when you're wrong. And no teenage boy wants to admit when they're wrong, right? Because they're macho kids, So I started doing it there. And then this past April, I started working with one of our collegiate athletic teams. And I've been working with them now for since the start of this school year in September as well. So about once a week I work with them. So I've got kind of two levels. I've got kind of a high school level and a college level. And really just it's a way to teach them how to bounce back from failure, teach them how to be resilient, teach them how to have grit. Then also look at how sports translate to life, and you're going to fail, like fail forward, don't be afraid to fail. You're going to make a mistake. How do you bounce back? That's what's more important. There's some leadership stuff, especially for the college team. I just really teach them how to be leaders. That's my area. And the coach kind of wants that. He wants all of it, but he's like, hey, can you put the leadership in there? I'm like, 100%. So that's what I do. And each week I come up with new kind of materials. And then, after a few weeks, you revisit something you did, but you add to it. So a lot of scaffolding into that. And it's really just, the benefits of being mentally tough is not just on the field, on the court, in the pool, on the mat, whatever your sport is. That's life. Like kind of what we talked about earlier today. It's like just, okay, this isn't working. This isn't the direction I want to go. What's next? How can I overcome this obstacle? How can I change my career? Maybe you change jobs and it's not what you thought it was. So it's hard on you. So, okay, that might be a year before you can get out of there, but you got to provide. So how do I handle that for that year that I'm in this tough spot? Maybe your relationship doesn't work out. So how do you handle those hard things in life? Well, if you've practiced in a controlled environment like sports, it's a little bit easier. So that's kind of where it all came from and what it's all about. And yeah.
Love it, Coach. I love it, Coach. And you are, it rings so true for me as a youth coach. And I think the ones that do it for these reasons, right? Like 1% of 1% actually go on to college, and then even smaller percentage goes on to the pros. Right. The whole reason we're letting our kids risk their brains at third grade to play football is not because they're going to go pro. It's because this is the only way in our world today that we can actually put these true examples of getting hit, literally getting hit, and having to get back up. And so I love what you're doing, Coach. Yeah. It is so needed. It is so important. And these boys, we want to be tough macho. We grew up in an era where it was all about being tough and macho. Yep. But I tell you, I'd say the boys are probably a little bit more sensitive than the girls just by nature. Even us in that era, like, even though we're supposed to. So I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you doing this. And honestly, I think this is your entrepreneurial. I think this could be something big for you. If you can scale this, and I know you can with all the educational virtual tools there are, man, this is something that people at every level, like it could be a program that USA football adopts, that Pop Warner adopts, that every high school. I mean, I can go on for hours. I love the entrepreneurial stuff too, but very cool, Coach. I'm super impressed, and I'm so glad we got a chance to talk, because we're talking about being vulnerable, and because we need to model that for coaches that are now taking or modeling this for their kids, and it's not natural for us to do it. Can you talk about like the biggest challenge that you had in your life and how you overcame it? And if you don't
Sure.
share whatever's natural for you to share, you don't have to go.
Yeah. And I'm pretty open. The one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome in my life. I mean, my family, my parents were amazing parents. I love them. They loved us hard. We didn't have a lot growing up. I mean, we were broke, to be honest. How they got my sister and I through private schools, I don't know. So, we came from not a whole lot. And then, like I said, I wasn't the smartest 17 to 19-year-old. I actually got in trouble right out of high school. The summer after high school, I just turned 18 in May and got in trouble, legal trouble, and was doing dumb stuff, made a bad choice, and got caught. And so that event, honestly, and knowing how hard, watching my parents, just struggle to get the bills paid and put food on the table, I knew I had to do something different so that I could be the dad like my dad. I mean, my dad's amazing. Like I'm not taking anything away from my parents. Their work ethic is what got me to where I'm at right now, 100%. But I made a mistake that was going to hurt me when it came time to trying to get a job, because I had a criminal record essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And so I knew I had to do something, and that's honestly what motivated me to go to college, because I knew, watching my dad grind and work these laborious jobs and beat his body up every day, that I didn't want to do that. And my uncles were like the age I am now at the time, who had all played sports through high school, and they're getting up and the knees are creaking, and I was like, to be an athlete and then to go into a hard laborer's job just wasn't the career I wanted. And I did that. I mean, I worked as an auto mechanic. I worked as a janitor. I mean, I've done those things, but I knew I didn't want to do it for 20 years. And so I knew going to school is what I had to do, because that could offset that blemish on my record. And so that's honestly the biggest challenge I've had to overcome. And it was hard for me. I couldn't talk about it. I had to hide that for a long time. But I think now I'm at the point where I need to share my story, because you can mess up, I mean, not that I'm encouraging people to make bad choices, take it from experience, make the right choices, but you can overcome it if you want to. And that's really, I do my podcast, and I tell my students now, like I tell them, I'm like, statistically, I should not have a PhD for a lot of reasons, but I did it because that's what I needed to do to get to where I'm at. And then now to be able to do this and give to the young kids that I coach, to mentor the students that I teach, and to help them be the next generation of business professionals, and allow them the chance to go out, I'm only going to be in this world for so long. I'm only going to work for so long. And I want people who can work in this world to make it better. So that's my contribution now. And it took me being an idiot for a couple of years to kind of go, oh, okay, it's time to be a big boy now and move past that. So that would be my biggest challenge. And yeah, so I don't always share the details, but I'm not afraid to admit that I made a mistake and it set me back. And it really did. I mean, there were jobs at that time in my life that I couldn't get because of what I'd done. And now, it was just being a teenager and having too much fun on the weekend, let's say.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, Coach. And I appreciate you opening up. I could tell it was a big moment in your life. But that, as we've said multiple times on this conversation, man, yes, don't get in trouble if you don't have to. But most of us have to learn the hard way. And when you do fall, again, another football lesson that we say in football, I have this phrase, like anytime a kid slips, like it's okay to fall, just get up. And let's
keep going.
Same thing, man. Just it's inevitable. You're gonna mess up, dude. But just get up and get going. and just keep moving forward. So thank you for sharing that, Coach.
Of course.
Thank you for all your insight and sharing everything that you have with us. I'm going to put all your CoachTube links in the chat. Anything else that I can put down there, I'll put in there so people can find you. What's the best?
Here's my YouTube channel. So I've got free stuff on YouTube. I've got the CoachTube. I've got the X handle. I've got the Instagram, and it's all just Coach Michael Fields or Coach Michael F, I think, on X. So all that stuff, yeah, and I share as often as I can. A lot of it now is this inspirational kind of mindset stuff that I share, because to me, if we can get that right with our youth and with our high school kids, hopefully they can avoid the situation I had to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just be ready to deal with it afterwards,
Yep.
right? Okay, Coach, we'll get it all on there. I guarantee people will be reaching out after this.
Please do.
To have you on my channel. Let's do it again, buddy.
Let's do it. I like it. Thanks.
All right, cool, man. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Quarterback Code. If you got value from this episode, please take a moment to like and let us know in the comments below. It helps us grow and bring you even more top-tier coaching content. Stay connected with us on Instagram, Twitter, and right here on YouTube. And be sure to join our highly active Coaches Community Facebook group, where we break down strategies, share insight, and support each other year-round. And most importantly, share this episode with other coaches who can benefit from it, because at the end of the day, without quarterback execution, you really don't have a chance.